This Sunday, presidential plans.
We will move forward.
Vice President Kamala Harris begins to outline and clarify her positions on key issues ahead of the 2-month sprint to Election Day.
My values have not changed.
Are there enough details in the Harris agenda to win over undecided voters? I'll talk to Democratic Congressman Khanna of California. Plus, Trump's promises. Donald Trump appears to try and moderate his position on women's health as the election nears, promising the government will pay for fertility treatments.
The government is going to pay for it, or we're going to get or mandate your insurance company to pay for it.
I'll talk to Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. And devastating discovery. The bodies of 6 hostages, including Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg Poland, are recovered in Gaza just days after his parents addressed the Democratic Convention.
Hirsch, if you can hear us, we love you. Stay strong. Survive.
How will this impact negotiations for a ceasefire? Joining me for insight and analysis are David Rhode, NBC's senior executive editor for national security, The Wall Street Journal senior political correspondent Molly Ball, Lanhee Chen, a fellow at the Hoover Institution, and María Teresa Kumar, president of Voto Latino. Welcome to Sunday. It's Meet the Press.
From NBC News in Washington, the longest-running show in television history, this is Meet the Press with Kristen Welker.
Good Sunday morning. Former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris will face off in their first debate next week as new polling shows just how competitive the race is with just over 2 months until Election Day. Nationally, Harris is leading Trump 48 to 47% in a Wall Street Journal poll of registered voters. A Quinnipiac poll shows Harris up 2 points among likely voters, 49 to 47%. In the battleground states, according to a set of Bloomberg Morning Consult polls, Harris and Trump are tied in Arizona and North Carolina. Harris is narrowly ahead in Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. And Harris is ahead outside the margin of error in Wisconsin. This week, the vice president sat down for her first interview since becoming the nominee and was pressed on why she shifted positions on some issues from fracking to Medicare for all to immigration since she first ran for president back in 2019.
I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed.
And this morning, there are new signs the issue of abortion is front and center in this race, as a growing share of voters, and particularly women, rank abortion second after the economy and give Harris an edge on the issue. For former President Trump, it's yet again posing political landmines. On Thursday, he was pressed by my colleague Dasha Burns about whether he would support an amendment that would overturn his home state of Florida's 6-week abortion ban.
There's an abortion-related amendment on the ballot to overturn the 6-week ban in Florida. How are you going to vote on that?
Well, I think the 6-week is too short. It has to be more time, and so and I've told them that I want more weeks.
So you'll vote in favor of the amendment?
I am going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks.
But the very next day, after a backlash from anti-abortion advocates, Mr. Trump said he couldn't back the amendment.
Are you voting yes or no on Amendment 4 in Florida?
So I think 6 weeks, you need more time than 6 weeks. I've disagreed with that right from the early primaries. When I heard about it, I disagreed with it. At the same time, the Democrats are radical because the 9 months is just a ridiculous situation where you can do an abortion in the 9th month. And, you know, some of the states like Minnesota and other states have it where you could actually execute the baby after birth. And all of that stuff is unacceptable. So I'll be voting no for that reason.
Now, less than 1% of abortions happen at 21 weeks or later, and usually because of catastrophic health risks or lethal fetal abnormalities. And, of course, infanticide is illegal in all 50 states. We will have more on all of that in a moment. But first, a devastating turn in the Israel-Gaza war. Israeli forces have recovered the bodies of 6 hostages in Gaza, including Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg Poland, whose parents met with world leaders pressing for his release, even speaking at the Democratic National Convention last month.
Anyone who is a parent or has had a parent can try to imagine the anguish and misery that John and I and all the hostage families are enduring.
Bring them home.
The Israeli Defense Forces said that the bodies were recovered on Saturday from an underground tunnel in the southern Gaza city of Rafah in an operation by the IDF, saying all 6 had been killed shortly before they were to be rescued by Israeli forces. In a statement, Vice President Kamala Harris said Hamas is an evil terrorist organization. With these murders, Hamas has even more American blood on its hands. President Biden spoke on Saturday night.
It's time this war ended. We should end this war. I think we're on the verge of having an agreement. It's just time to end it.
And joining me now is Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Senator Cotton, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you, Kristen, for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here. Let's start with this devastating news, the discovery of 6 bodies, hostages, including Israeli-American Hersh Goldberg Poland. Everyone, I think, feels heartbroken this morning, the entire nation and, frankly, world mourning these deaths. What is your reaction, Senator, and what do you think this will mean for hostage negotiations?
Well, it's terribly sad news that Hamas executed these 6 hostages in cold blood, apparently shot them in the head shortly before they might have been rescued by Israeli Defense Forces. My heart goes out to all the families, especially Hersh Goldberg Poland's family, our fellow American. There are other fellow Americans still to be accounted for. But I think we should note that these hostages were discovered in the tunnels under Rafah. That's where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris put pressure on Israel not to enter for months, used an arms embargo to try to keep them from entering. Kamala Harris even said that Israel shouldn't enter Rafah because she had studied the maps. What the Biden-Harris administration should have done from the beginning is not pressure Israel to restrain its response, but let Israel win from the very outset. For 11 months, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have put more pressure on Israel than they put on Hamas and Iran's other terror proxies.
And, Senator, just to be clear, there, of course, is no arms embargo. It is true that the Biden administration did halt one shipment of arms out of concern over civilian casualties.
No, Kristen, that's not correct.
It is correct. There's no arms embargo.
For weeks, the Biden-Harris administration put an embargo not just on large 2,000-pound bombs, which, of course, are needed to penetrate these deep and buried tunnels, but on things like tank rounds and artillery shells and mortar rounds.
It was just one shipment of arms. It was the 2,000-pound weapons that you're talking about and 500 pounds. But
it was a large category of weapons.
Okay, but they have now moved forward with that. It's not an arms embargo, though, just to be very clear. That's a very specific term, and it's not an arms embargo.
It was in place for many weeks, specifically to try to prevent Israel from entering Rafah, where these hostages were discovered. Yeah. If we had simply backed Israel to the hilt from October 7th, this war would probably be over. We probably would have found many more hostages alive, and there would have been fewer civilian casualties caused by Hamas's infliction of those civilian casualties on its own people. But at every turn, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have put more pressure on Israel than they have on Iran and Hamas.
And, of course, they have also argued that the U.S. stands firmly behind Israel. It was one arms shipment. Let's talk about Prime Minister
Kristen,
Netanyahu.
it was more than it was many more. Kristen,
Netanyahu
you can do your fact check thing all you want. I'm going to tell you the real facts. It was a large category of weapons far beyond just 2,000-pound bombs.
Okay, but it wasn't an arms embargo. That's my only point. It wasn't specifically an arms embargo. Let's just move forward, though, in terms of what Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing right now, because he's been facing pressure in the wake of this. He's been resistant to accepting this hostage deal. Axios' Barak Ravid reports that a senior Israeli official said, quote, "We warned Netanyahu and the cabinet ministers about this exact scenario, but they wouldn't listen." Do you believe Prime Minister Netanyahu bears any responsibility for not getting a deal sooner?
No, I believe Hamas bears responsibility for not turning these hostages back over to their families and surrendering. At every turn, Benjamin Netanyahu has tried to meet the Biden administration halfway. They continue to move the goalposts. They continue to encourage and embolden Hamas. Consider what happened just a few weeks ago when the Prime Minister was here to speak at the Capitol. Kamala Harris didn't even sit behind him in a joint session of her Congress, one of her few duties as vice president. Then she came out after a private meeting with him and stressed that we need a ceasefire now, which is the de facto Hamas position. What did you have 2 days later? You had Israeli children being blown up on playgrounds because every time Joe Biden and Kamala Harris put more pressure on Israel, it simply emboldens Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran.
Just to be very clear, though, there is pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu. You have people protesting in the streets. He is, of course, the leader of Israel, and that's who I'm asking you about. Do you think, and would you urge him in this moment, Senator, to get a deal given these casualties?
I would urge him to finish the job against Hamas, which is exactly what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden should have done from the very beginning. Again, if we had backed Israel to the hilt, if we hadn't continually put pressure on Israel to slow and to moderate its response, Hamas would have been broken and we would have gotten more of these hostages down alive. The only time Hamas has even come close to releasing hostages is when they are on the ropes.
And of course, the U.S. has given more aid, both military and monetary, to Israel than any other country. But let's
well, to be exact, we've given hundreds of billions of dollars in relief to Iran.
Well, some of that money, of course, is frozen. But let's move on to some domestic issues, if we could. The issue of abortion front and center this week. Donald Trump has gone from calling himself throughout the arc of time very pro-choice at one point. He's more recently bragged about overturning Roe v. Wade. He now says he's going to vote to keep Florida's 6-week abortion ban in place, a law he once described as terrible. How can people trust Trump on this issue when he keeps shifting his position?
Well, the president's been very clear. He does not support a nationwide abortion law. In fact, there's only one candidate in this race who supports a nationwide abortion law. It's Kamala Harris. And we know what it is because the Senate proposed it and we voted on it. It is radical and extreme. It would require taxpayer funding of abortion up to the moment of birth. That's what she stands for. She's the only one in this race calling for a nationwide abortion law, something that is wildly unpopular.
Just to be clear, the bill you're talking to requires that there be exceptions for health through the end of pregnancy, not that all abortions be legal in all cases.
But President Trump has said he supports exceptions when a woman's health is at risk, when she's been raped or been the victim of incest. And the vast majority of Americans support those as well. But this law is radical. It would overturn 50 years of precedent and require taxpayer funding for abortion, even in these cases.
Well, taxpayer funding for abortion is currently, of course, illegal under the Hyde Amendment. And just to be clear, abortions later in pregnancy, 21 weeks and after, are extremely rare.
Well, if they're so rare,
in the case of a health emergency.
If they're so rare, why won't Kamala Harris say, then fine, we shouldn't allow them with those exceptions?
Because
if they're
of the concern
so rare
for health emergencies.
But if you have those exceptions, Kristen, if you have those exceptions, it will account for those rare health emergencies. So why won't she say it?
But that is what the law does. It says up to the time of viability with exceptions. States are allowed to have exceptions if there are health emergencies.
Kamala Harris voted against the Born Alive Victims Protection Act.
She did not.
Yes, she did.
Senator,
I was there.
She voted against.
I was there. She voted against it. Kristen, if these cases are so rare,
she voted
in the
against
late
advancing
term,
the bill twice.
If these cases are so rare in late-term pregnancy, then why won't she say, you know what, we should prohibit these with exceptions for the mother's life?
Yeah.
Why won't she say that? Because she is a radical on abortion.
Just to be clear, she voted against advancing the bill twice when she was senator. She's called it extreme. Let me ask you about something else. I interviewed J.D. Vance last week. He told me Donald Trump would veto a federal abortion ban if it came to his desk. Now Trump is not committing to that. Do you think he would sign that veto if it came to his desk?
Well, Kristen, I think it's a hypothetical first off. We both know there's not going to be 60 votes in the Senate anytime soon for either party's preferred or centrist position on abortion, whether it's the radical position that Democrats have or the pro-life position that most Republicans have. So I think it's a hypothetical question. But President Trump has been consistent, is that there's not going to be a nationwide abortion law while he's president. He appointed 3 justices who reversed Roe v. Wade, which was wrongly decided, which even liberal scholars acknowledged was poorly reasoned, and returned this question to where it had rested for 170 years, which is the American people making choices through their elected representatives at their states. States are going to have different kinds of laws. Donald Trump has acknowledged that.
I hear you're saying that former President Trump has been consistent, but as we showed, he's actually pivoted quite a bit on this issue. But J.D. Vance was very clear. He said that Donald Trump would veto a nationwide ban. And I guess the question is, why can't Trump be clear with people about where he stands? Are you clear? I know you're saying it's a hypothetical.
Kristen, he
but
has
are you
been
clear
clear
about
that,
what he would do?
He has been clear that there will not be a nationwide abortion law when he's president. He has been perfectly consistent on that. Now, Kamala Harris, to her credit, she's been consistent and not tried to hide her radical position on abortion. It's the only position she hasn't tried to hide over the last 6 weeks, like her position on decriminalizing illegal immigration or banning gas-powered cars or banning fracking. Abortion is the one issue on which she hasn't tried to hide her position from the American people in this election.
I'm going to talk to Congressman Khanna about all of that coming up. But let's stick with Donald Trump. His big announcement on IVF this week. He said Thursday he wants the government to pay for or force insurance companies to cover IVF. Is that something you would support, Senator?
Well, all Republicans, to my knowledge, support IVF in the Congress, and there's no state that prohibits or regulates IVF in a way that makes it inaccessible. It is expensive for many couples. I understand that. So it's something I'm open to, that most Republicans would be open to. I think we'd have to evaluate the fiscal impact, whether the taxpayer can afford to pay for this, what impact it would have on premiums. But in principle, supporting couples who are trying to use IVF or other fertility treatments, I don't think is something that's controversial at all.
Well, 2 months ago, you voted against a Senate bill that would have protected and expand IVF access, and it would have mandated that some coverage was covered by health insurance plans. If that bill came back to the floor, would you now support it? Is that what you're saying?
You mean Chuck Schumer's ridiculous messaging bill?
So no.
That requires fertility treatment for men who think they're women? That was slapped together in the summer, in which he slapped together a bunch of other bills.
It's a bill that also would have protected and expanded IVF
Chuck Schumer has spent all summer. Chuck Schumer spent all summer long slapping together ridiculous bills that he thinks are going to help his liberal incumbent senators face off in their re-elections.
Just very quickly, do you know where this money would come from to cover IVF? Because in 2022, some $8 billion were paid by.
Well, no, again, that's why I say we'd have to evaluate any specific legislation.
So you wouldn't support taxpayer dollars.
I'd have to evaluate any specific legislation as I would on any legislation.
So you're still undecided on where you stand on this government-funded IVF plan.
Well, I certainly support couples having access to IVF, and it's not even a controversial issue in any of the 50 states.
All right, let me ask you about another one of the big headlines this week, Donald Trump's visit to Arlington National Cemetery. You've been talking about this. He attended a wreath-laying ceremony, obviously, for the 13 service members who were killed during the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. He was invited by those family members, important to say that. He also had campaign staffers with him. Photos, videos were posted on a campaign site. Taking campaign photos and videos at grave sites is forbidden under federal law. You, of course, served at Arlington Cemetery in the Old Guard, so I know that this is a sacred place for you. Bottom line, though, I guess, Senator, is it ever appropriate to make campaign content at military grave sites?
He didn't take campaign photos there. These families, Gold Star families, whose children died because of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's incompetence, invited him to the cemetery. And they asked him to take those photos because, as they told me yesterday, when I spoke to Kelly Barnett and Darren Hoover, the parents of Taylor Hoover, who has Arkansas ties, they don't get to go to the beach on Labor Day. They don't get to have barbecues. This is their one chance to have a memory of their children, to commemorate their service and to honor their sacrifice. They wanted President Trump there. They wanted to take those photos. You know who the families also invited? Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Where were they? Joe Biden was sitting at a beach. Kamala Harris was sitting at her mansion in Washington, D.C. She was 4 miles away. 10 minutes. She could have gone to the cemetery and honored the sacrifice of those young men and women. But she hasn't. She never has spoken to them or taken a meeting with them.
Well, they did meet with them during the dignified transfer.
Because of
they were with them at the dignified transfer.
Her and Joe Biden's incompetence, those 13 Americans were killed in Afghanistan.
Well, not everyone obviously was pleased with this visit. And again, just the law says memorial services and ceremonies at Army, national, military cemeteries will not include partisan political activities.
And it didn't, Chris. President Trump wasn't wearing a red...
It was posted on a campaign site, though.
He wasn't wearing a red MAGA hat.
I understand.
He didn't have a Trump hat.
It was posted on the
just
Trump
like Joe
TikTok
Biden, just like Joe Biden has posted content of himself in the cemetery or in other cemeteries.
He wasn't with campaign
or in a dignified
staffers.
Transfer.
Yeah.
They're all American citizens. They have a right to go there and to honor the sacrifice of those 13 Americans who Joe Biden and Kamala Harris sent to their death.
Let me ask you about what we're hearing from another family. The family of Master Sergeant Andrew Marchesano. He was a Green Beret. His family was concerned that his grave was actually shown in a photo that was posted on social media. A statement from the Marquesano's sister, Michelle, said, quote, "We hope that those visiting this sacred site understand that these were real people who sacrificed our freedom and that they are honored and respected accordingly." Did the Trump campaign fail to honor her wishes, their wishes?
No, Kristen, they honored the wishes of the 13 families whose children died at Abbey Gate. Those families wanted the photos. They told me yesterday that they specifically asked President Trump for the photos. Obviously, headstones at Arlington are close to each other. And when you take a photo of your loved one, when you take a photo of your loved one, then other headstones are going to be present as well. Frankly, I think it's pretty disappointing that the New York Times went and found a family whose headstone was featured in that photograph of another Gold Star family, and then went to them to try to embarrass the Gold Star families who wanted President Trump.
Very quickly, have you had any conversations with former President Trump about joining his administration should he win?
All we're talking about is making sure that he does win and that we elect Republican majorities in the Congress so we can begin to reverse some of the damage that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have caused.
All right, Senator Tom Cotton, thank you so much for being here this morning on this Labor Day. Hope you get some time with family. Really appreciate it. When we come back, is Vice President Harris doing enough to clearly explain her agenda and how her views have evolved? Democratic Congressman Khanna joins me next. Welcome back. How much will Vice President Harris draw a distinction between President Biden's record and what she will do if elected? In her first joint interview as the Democratic nominee, Harris defended some of her policy shifts since she ran for the White House back in 2019. Joining me now to discuss all of this is Democratic Congressman Khanna of California. Congressman Khanna, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Kristen, thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here. I have to start with this just devastating and tragic news. The revelation that 6 hostages have been killed by Hamas, including Israeli-American Hersh Goldberg Poland. What is your reaction, and what do you think this will mean for hostage negotiations?
Well, my heart breaks for the family of Hersh Goldberg Poland. I met, like many, his parents, John and Rachel. He was a Californian. They spoke about his love for life. He was planning to go to India. He was planning to travel the world, and it's just a devastating loss, his murder by Hamas. But what we need now is an end to the war, and we need to continue to pressure Hamas to unconditionally release the hostages. But the hostage families themselves are saying that Netanyahu needs to actually be in the negotiation. Gallant, his own defense minister, has criticized Netanyahu in the cabinet for saying that the Fidelfi corridor, that Netanyahu is not willing to withdraw troops there as Egypt and the United States want. So I hope there's going to be pressure on Hamas and Netanyahu to end this war, release the hostages.
Let me ask you big picture about something. This is according to the Washington Post, which says that Vice President Harris would conduct a full review, if elected, of the U.S.-Israel policy and could be open to imposing conditions on some aid to Israel. I know that that's something that you have supported. Have you been pushing her directly to support conditioned aid to Israel?
I've been pushing her to support the enforcement of U.S. law. That is what the enforcement of the Lanhee law and our security laws require, that we don't have unconditional aid. And, Kristen, this isn't unprecedented. In 1982, after the Sabra and Shatila massacres in Lebanon, President Reagan called up Menachem Begin in Israel and said, we will not give aid in a way that's going to cause humanitarian crises. So we need to have pressure on both sides to end the war, and I'm glad the Vice President's open to a new direction.
Has she expressed openness, though, to conditioning aid to you directly in some of your conversations?
No, I will leave that for the Vice President to articulate, but what she has, her team has expressed openness is to a new direction. And look, anyone looking at this policy, you have hostages who still aren't released. You have a war that has lasted almost 11 months. You have over 40,000 people in Gaza dying. We need a new direction of policy to bring the war to an end.
Let me ask you about another foreign policy issue. You just heard Senator Cotton there sharply critical of the Biden administration, of President Biden and Vice President Harris for the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. Vice President Harris has said that she was the last one in the room for that decision about that withdrawal. Do you think she bears some responsibility for the way that that withdrawal was carried out?
Well, first of all, it was Donald Trump who wanted us to get out of Afghanistan, was never able to do it. I give President Biden and Vice President Harris for finally ending a war after 20 years. And my heart goes out to the Gold Star families of the 13 Marines we lost. I have tremendous admiration for the service of those who were lost, but I think the war had to end, and there needs to be a review of why those victims were there, our Marines. And of course, the administration needs to explain that. But the big issue here was that President Biden ended a war that Donald Trump said he wanted to end.
There were some recommendations that troops should still be stationed there. Do you believe she bears some of the responsibility for some of those key decisions that were made that did lead to that withdrawal, which we all witnessed, which by all accounts, including Biden administration acknowledging, was botched?
I think she is proud of the Biden-Harris record. She deserves credit for ending the war, and to the extent that there were mistakes made, of course she is part of that administration. But you know the difference, Kristen, is when no one is perfect in government, and President Biden's team himself has acknowledged certain mistakes, but leaders take responsibility, and they're open and they're honest. And yes, there were certain mistakes made, but the war was ended, and that is the big decision that she deserves and President Biden deserves credit for.
Let's talk about the interview that Vice President Harris had this week. She talked about some of those policy reversals that have now been in the spotlight. She previously supported Medicare for all. She now doesn't. She favored a ban on fracking. She now doesn't. She once argued against criminalizing illegal border crossing. She now says, quote, there should have to be consequences. She said when she defended these policy positions that her values have not changed, even though her policies have. Why should people believe what she says now?
Well, first of all, I think she came off with confidence, calmness, and non-defensiveness. And I hope she'll do more of these interviews. I actually agree with your predecessor, Chuck Todd, that she should go on these weekly shows. She's very competent, and as running for president, have her views out there and take the hard questions. But let's go issue by issue on fracking. President Biden ran in 2020 on a position saying that there were going to be no new fracking leases on federal land. Our federal land is sacred, and that we were going to protect that. He did not say that we were going to ban fracking in private lands. In states like Pennsylvania, most of the fracking is on private lands. And Vice President Harris ran on that position. In the vice presidential debate, she said that Joe Biden and her were not going to end fracking on private land. So my assumption is this is the same position. She's not going to have new leases on federal land, but she's going to be fine with fracking as a transition on private land. That was what they ran on in 2020.
Well, let's delve into one of the policy positions, another one, more specifically, her initial support and now opposition to a single-payer health care system. You support
I do.
that. Let's play something that Senator Bernie Sanders told Politico just last month.
We need Medicare for all. It's not her view, nor is it President Biden's point of view. And you know what? I think I'm right and they're wrong. But what am I going to do?
Are you disappointed that Vice President Harris is not running on an agenda that includes Medicare for all?
Well, I strongly support Medicare for all. I support getting people on Medicare, dental, vision, hearing. Those are basics. And I believe that people should not have to go bankrupt because of medical debt. And I hope that we can get to Medicare for all. But if Vice President Harris is going to take incremental approaches to improve health care for families, to expand Medicaid, to expand the Affordable Care Act, that's better than going backwards and having Donald Trump who wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act.
Zooming out, what do you say to progressives who feel abandoned by Vice President Harris on some of these key issues?
I said, look at the progress we have made. You have Bernie Sanders having a progressive agenda that influenced President Biden, that led to the American Rescue Plan, that had the child care tax credit, that had massive investments in manufacturing in schools. And Vice President Harris has taken some bold progressive positions. She's calling for building more housing. She's calling for expanding the child tax credit. She's calling for capping rents that are outrageous. So progress isn't made in one fell swoop, but we're moving in the right direction.
Do you think she would consider herself to be a proud progressive? How would she label herself?
Well, I let her do that, but I think of her as a progressive who's pragmatic to meet the needs. But this idea that she hasn't been consistent. I mean, what about Donald Trump's flip-flops? What about his flip-flops on abortion?
Senator Cotton about that.
And so I think the vice president is consistent on the position on fracking. It's exactly how Joe Biden ran. I think on Medicare for all, I ran against her as a co-chair of Bernie Sanders' campaign. She was not for Medicare for all in that 2020 primary. That was part of the difference. So is she as progressive as me or Bernie Sanders or others? No, but she is moving in a progressive direction for the party in a focus on working in middle-class Americans.
Congressman Khanna, thank you so much for being here on
you,
this
President.
holiday weekend. We really appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.
And when we come back, the fight over abortion rights was back in the spotlight this week. Our panel is next. Welcome back. The panel is here. NBC News national security editor David Rhode, author of the new book, Where Tyranny Begins, The Justice Department, the FBI, and the War on Democracy. Molly Ball, senior political correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. María Teresa Kumar, president of Voto Latino. And Lanhee Chen, a fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. Thanks to all of you for being here on this Labor Day weekend. David, I have to start with you. This devastating news that we all woke up to, the news of these 6 hostages killed. You, of course, were held by the Taliban in Afghanistan for 7 months. I know that you know this family. I know that you are grieving this morning. The implications of this for where things go in Gaza from here.
I met the Pollins in this very studio. You've interviewed them. Lester Holt sat down with all the families of the Americans that have been taken hostage. John and Rachel, Hirsch's parents, are just extraordinary. And the odd thing, my case was many years ago. I think Hirsch suffered much more. His courage, he had his hand blown off by a grenade, and he was still dragged into Gaza. His hand appeared to have been amputated while he was in captivity. That was in a video that was released by Hamas in April. And his struggle to end this way is just heartbreaking. And then John and Rachel have just been incredible in many ways. And I'm biased on this. I'm a proud NBC national security editor, and I want to be nonpartisan, but hostage taking is a very cruel crime. It's particularly cruel and I think cowardly for the families. I know that John and Rachel, my own family, you sit there thinking, how can I save my loved one? Can I get President Biden or Prime Minister Netanyahu to do something? And it's just cruel to the families. So this is just heartbreaking, and I'm so sorry for Hirsch and his family and for all the hostages.
María Teresa, we heard from them at the Democratic National Convention when they spoke out, and they have been so outspoken. Bring our son home. They have shared their grief, their horror with the world so bravely, and yet here we are.
I mean, my heart goes out to their families. I do think that what Kamala Harris has been able to do is weave this idea that you need national security for Israel and protections while recognizing that there has to be justification and protecting the innocent in Gaza. I do think, though, moving forward, that if this blows up into a regional issue, this could be the October surprise. And going into the election, if that is the case, Americans are going to ask, who is going to be the commander-in-chief? Who is the one that should be at that table? And I think that is something that we should be watching. But again, the grievance that you expressed, I cannot imagine.
Lanhee?
Well, it's an awful day, without question. I think the challenge for the Harris team is that they're trying to have it both ways. And you saw this a little bit in her convention speech. That on the one hand, she wants to stand with Israel. On the other hand, she's talking about the need to be respectful or to be understanding of the position of the Palestinians, and understanding that this is a Hamas-driven activity. And there's a difference there, to be sure. But I think that there's a little bit of confusion here because this is an issue that divides the Democratic Party's base as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes the politics a little bit complex here for her, because she's got to navigate this in order to keep the support of her base, but also appear palatable to swing voters.
Yeah, Molly, I mean, we started to get at that with Congressman Khanna. I mean, just how complicated the politics of this are. The fact that you do have a fair number of voters in states like Michigan and states throughout the so-called blue wall, to name a few, who are deeply driven by this issue.
And Kamala Harris was asked about this in her CNN interview this week, and she just kept saying, we need a deal, we need a deal. We haven't gotten a deal, and months have gone by, and President Biden has persistently said it's close, it's close, it's close. But the U.S. can't be the only one who wants a deal here. If Israel doesn't want a deal, if Hamas doesn't want a deal, and at various times both sides have rejected these different arrangements that the U.S. has tried to broker. And I think to Maria Teresa's point, with every passing day that deal is not achieved, it is a reminder not only of the issue of arms to Israel, which Kamala Harris did not really answer in that interview, and which does continue to divide the Democratic base. There is a significant portion, as we all saw in Chicago, that is animated by that issue and does not like her position on it. And it's a reminder that this conflict persists. And for you know, in a lot of polls, voters do say that they trust Trump more on foreign policy, in part because there are these ongoing conflicts overseas in which the U.S. has interests at stake and remains embroiled, and the administration has not, for whatever reason, been able to bring them to a close.
Yeah, Lanhee, you know, the race could also turn, not just on the issue of foreign policy and everything that is happening in the Middle East right now, but on domestic policy, and obviously abortion is front and center in that. We are watching former President Donald Trump wrestle with this in real time. For example, on Thursday, he suggested he was going to basically vote against the 6-week ban. Then by Friday, he had shifted gears because he was under so much pressure. How do you think this will play out, given the polling?
Well, this is another example of the pressure between swing voters and base voters. And this is, in some ways, the equivalent in terms of how this issue plays out. I think that Republican voters will give Donald Trump a lot of grace on this issue. So I don't tend to believe that there will be a large migration of base voters away from him because his position has been a little bit tortured on this issue. I do think it's the case, though, that the energy of the Republican base is something that could be affected if this continues to drag out. So that's why it was important for his campaign to do as they did, which is to try to clarify this as quickly as possible, because this is one of those things that if you let it linger, the energy is really the problem. It's not so much that they're going to go vote for Kamala Harris, it's that they may not be as enthused to vote for Donald Trump.
Maria, Teresa, it's so fascinating because Donald Trump is both someone who's taken responsibility for overturning Roe v. Wade, and at the same time, the minute it was overturned, understood that this would be a political liability for him. And it has been for Republicans. When he comes out and says, hey, free IVF for everyone, is that something that makes Democrats nervous, that maybe we should have proposed that first?
No, I think, first of all, I think this is real policy implications where there are women, sadly, that are dying under these bans. And so we have to remember that whatever policy decisions we end up with, that there are actual harm being caused every single day, the more they delay addressing this issue. And I do think that the Democrats realize that he is not growing his base. He needs to grow his base. And I actually think that, to your point, he's making a lot of evangelicals nervous with his flip-flopping. And that is one of the reasons why he recognizes, wait a second, I need to pull myself back because where are my voters coming from? His strategy to win the election is to make sure that his MAGA Republicans, evangelicals come out. He's losing independent, moderate voters from all the polling that we're seeing. So he has to figure out, how do you thread the needle while ensuring that the other side does not come out?
Molly, how do you see this and the fact that we have new polling that shows that women voters increasingly see this as their top issue, tied with or second to the economy? We've never seen that before, quite frankly.
And this is an issue in which Trump has always been sort of caught in a vise. And, you know, his position from the beginning was that he was proud of the decision overturning Roe v. Wade because it returned it to the states and then the states could do whatever they want. But we've seen in practice how it's more complicated than that. How, you know, when Arizona tried to dramatically restrict abortion, Trump actually intervened to pressure the legislature to overturn that ban. In Florida, where it's on the ballot and where he is a voter, he's got to say how he would actually vote on a state's decision. And he, as we've talked about, went back and forth because he has to simultaneously reassure his base that he will continue to fight for them, but also speak to swing voters. The other part of his base that he risks with this IVF gambit is fiscal conservatives. You heard Senator Cotton not wanting to commit to what would essentially be an expansion of Obamacare and a massive expense for the federal government if they were to have the government cover IVF. I don't think you would get a lot of Republican senators going along with something like that. And so for not only pro-life conservatives, but fiscal conservatives who want limited limited government and less spending, this is a little bit disturbing to see where Trump is going on these issues.
All right, guys, stand by, pause. We're going to start the next panel with you, David. Stay with us when we come back. Price controls and the high cost of living have been top of mind for American voters for decades. Our Meet the Press Minute is next. This Labor Day weekend, both campaigns are leaning into the economy, the top issue for voters. Vice President Harris's proposal to ban price gouging in the grocery industry has gotten attention and some criticism, with former President Trump saying she has endorsed, quote, Soviet-style price controls, and Harris's allies arguing that her plan is instead a targeted expansion of existing state powers. Back in 1951, here's how the president of the United Automobile Workers talked about the debate over price controls here on Meet the Press.
We believe that when we fight for effective price control, to really have a law that begins to roll back the cost of living and then control it, we think we're reflecting the desires and the needs of the great majority of American people. We think when we fight for a tax law that begins to place the burden of the cost of defending freedom upon all people based upon their ability to pay, we think we're fighting the battle of the average American.
And you think that in a democracy, at a time of war, when some of our sons are in Korea, that when you walk out the way you did, that you're speaking for the plain people of America whose sons are in Korea and who are being drafted?
What about the GI who leaves his children back here with a wife? Doesn't skyrocketing prices affect her? Doesn't the lack of rent control affect their welfare? So we're fighting for these things because it helps all Americans.
A debate then, a debate now. When we come back, the special counsel revised his indictment against Donald Trump this week after the Supreme Court's immunity decision. What role will Trump's legal battles play ahead of November? More with the panel next. Welcome back. The panel is still here. And David, I want to start with you and your new book, Where Tyranny Begins. But put it against this backdrop. This week, special counsel Jack Smith filed a new indictment against former President Trump, basically stripping out all the references to official acts in his initial indictment in the wake of the Supreme Court's ruling on immunity. And it relates to your new book, particularly where you reflect on former President Trump's impact on the legal system. You write, quote, in 4 years as president and 3 years as an ex-president, Trump has successfully used conspiracy theories, co-option, and threats to bend DOJ and FBI officials to his will. Those who dared to defy him and had their reputations damaged and their careers derailed. That is not the rule of law. That is not democracy. What else did you find in this book, in researching this book?
That these tactics worked. I was shocked at how afraid people were to speak to me on the record, and concerned about what could happen in a Trump administration. And since I finished the book, the Supreme Court came out with this immunity decision, which, as you said, makes it legal. Any official act by a president with the attorney general is allowed, anything. And this is unprecedented in American history. It's never existed before. A concrete example, again, recent events. On Tuesday, Donald Trump is coming out with a new book, a picture book. And in that picture book, he says that if Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook, does anything to interfere in the 2024 election, Zuckerberg will spend the rest of his life in jail. Under this immunity ruling, Trump can call up his attorney general, tell him to prosecute Zuckerberg, and if that attorney general refuses to carry that order out, he can fire him. And again, under the immunity ruling, that is absolute immunity, privileged communication between the president and the attorney general. This did not happen. Richard Nixon had his attorney general look for, prosecute his political enemies, look for leaks against the president. This is a whole new era that we're in now.
Yeah, Lanhee, what is your take both on what David has written in his book and this moment that we are in which former President Trump is still facing these indictments, albeit doesn't seem like they're going to go to trial before Election Day?
I mean, I think the political impact of the superseding indictment is minimal unless there's some additional resolution of this case, which appears unlikely. I think people are pretty dug in their points of view. I do think this Supreme Court decision is going to have a very long tail, well beyond a second Trump term, whoever is president next. I mean, the decision talks about the value of an energetic executive. This decision basically gives the executive 2 Red Bulls and a coffee, right? I mean, this is like beyond energetic. And so the concern one has is in the future, what does this mean for executive power going forward? Already we have an executive that's much more active now than at any point in recent American history. And it puts a premium on what executives promise in a campaign, because they then are much more well positioned to engage in executive action to get things done. That's why it matters what they say on the campaign trail now, because now they actually have the legal backing to do things with it.
Maria, all of this is taking place against the backdrop of we are 9 days out from the first debate between former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. What are you watching for as we get closer to that all-important moment?
So I think one of the things that has made Harris really a household name is that she is playing in a completely different sandbox than Donald Trump. She does not engage with him, and she does it with joy, and she deflects him. And we saw that in the interview as well. And I think what the American people are going to look for is that when she engages him, is it going to be through this lens of, I see who you are, buddy. You are a convicted felon, and I'm the prosecutor. And we know that among the American people, they may not like Donald Trump, but what they really don't like is that they keep finding these egregious breaking of the law, and they are wanting someone to put him in his place. And how is she going to do that? And how is she going to define it? I think is going to be really important.
Yeah, I mean, Molly, we have seen her come out very forcefully right from the beginning and really lean into her background as a prosecutor and try to, as Maria Teresa is saying, make that distinction with former President Trump. What does she need to do in the debate? And obviously, they're both preparing in very different ways, these two different candidates.
Right. And I think they are both going to seek to put the other on the defensive. And that is going to be the crucial thing that I think we're all watching for is we've seen her be less comfortable when it comes to defending her own positions and explaining her own values, as she puts it. So is she able to keep Trump on the defensive? Is she able to keep the focus on him and the case that she wants to make against him and not get bogged down in, explaining where she stands? Because, I think part of what happened in the June 27th debate, of course, all of the focus was on President Biden and his dramatic sort of collapse. But a lot of voters who watched that debate weren't necessarily in love with what Trump was doing either. And so I think the question is, can she continue to do this tightrope walk where she's able to position herself as both, an owner and a defender of the administration that she's been a part of, but also a candidate who's seeking to represent change and to turn the page? That is a tricky balancing act, and I think it's going to be interesting to see whether and how she can pull that off.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. The first debate proving how significant debates can be. Great conversation to all of you. Thank you for being here. That is all for today. Thank you for watching. Have a great Labor Day weekend. We'll be back next week because if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.